Friday Night Racing
on Off the Ball.
Brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment. Visit hri.ie.
3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon or 8 p.m. on Off the Ball on News Talk. It's Friday Night Racing, brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment. Visit hri.ie. You can follow the Twitter account at HRI Racing, and the hashtag is every racing moment. Johnny, good afternoon to you. How are you?
We have actually started the show a little bit early, a little bit before 3, and Edward O'Grady, our guest today, may be aware of this. There used to be a rule in Irish racing, and Irish racing was often like whatever, the buses or whatever, was always a few minutes late, and every race was late and all of that. And about 15 years ago, they decided we're going to sort this out. And then Irish racing did nothing that has ever been done before in Ireland in terms of us against the Brits. We're actually way better at getting racing off on time than British racetracks are now. But anyway, that's my long way of saying, in the day, if the starter started the race a second early before say if we were off at 3:30 and he was 3:29.57, if he started 3 seconds early, 1 second early, or early at all, the race was null and void. So that's one of the things that Edward may remember from his many years of racing that we're going to celebrate today.
Edward, good afternoon to you. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Nice to hear you.
Do you remember is Johnny making any sense there at all about the starter and the crisis in Irish racing when the racing wouldn't go off on time?
That doesn't sound good.
Well, I remember races being void and stuff like that. And I remember there was a bit of a hoo-ha about the off times, but it was never a great concern to me.
Fair enough. It's a big week for you. It's the 50th anniversary this week of your first victory and your first winner at the Thyestes Day in Goran. When you look back on the 50 years that you've been a trainer officially and all the stuff beforehand, obviously, it's a life steeped in racing. Where do you feel we are right now in terms of the evolution of the sport and how we're getting on?
I think in terms of prize money and in terms of opportunity, that racing has improved enormously. But, like everything, one has to look at it in a positive fashion, and at the same time, there's room for much more improvement. Certainly, from the fact that we have better prize money than the UK is nothing to be complacent about. And I would like to see the prize money, particularly at the lower level, increase so much more. I think that the money is there if it can be channeled in the right direction, and that's what I'd like to see.
If you were looking at economics training in Britain right now, Edward, and you were in a second life, you're going to start training in Britain, the prize money levels there, Rich Forrester had a good article this week in the Racing Post about the number of British trained runners in Cheltenham, which I think used to be 85 to 15 Irish, and now is more or less 60-40, and prize money is basically everything, isn't it?
Well, I don't know that the prize money has made the difference in the Cheltenham business. I think what has made the difference in the Cheltenham business is that you have trainers here with owners, of which a lot happen to be English, and they're trawling the point-to-points and the young horses. And if in any business you trawl the young stock year in, year out, well, then only the minnows or the lucky one that gets through is what's left for the opposition. And by and large, that's what they've been doing for the last number of years, and they're getting the results accordingly.
That's exactly the point I was making to Ger before we came on. I was talking about from your days of my first racing memory, or my first day kind of going racing when I got into racing, was when Back in Front won in Limerick prior to winning in the Supreme, which obviously was the first race in Cheltenham, and that was the first Cheltenham that I watched. And I remember going as a student to the Limerick kind of the race day. I think it was a student race day, was in DCU, and I was completely engrossed with it. But I was just making the point that you haven't had a good horse in a while, and that's totally down to what you call the trawling of the young horses and the winning point-to-pointers by the big owners.
Well, the last point-to-pointer that I bought was Tranquil Sea.
Wow.
Happened to be a very good horse, but if you can imagine, if I could go out and buy 15 or 20 Tranquil Seas every year and have them year in, year out, my God Almighty, my record would be totally different. But I'm not in that position. Some people are lucky enough to be in that position, and like everything, success breeds success, and they're just doing marvelously well.
That's the one thing about the jumps racing that has changed a bit, isn't it? Like, we'll talk about the Thyestes today, and Denoli's trainer, Tom Foley, who obviously was quite close to, was based quite close to Gordon or whatever, but the romance isn't quite what it was, because it just seems to be harder for that Denoli story to come along, I guess.
It is harder, but at the same time, that's why we're all there. If we didn't think that, you can't win the lotto if you don't buy a ticket. And similarly, if you don't continue to have young stock, even though the chances are probably going to be lesser than the people who are buying the proven stock, and they're also buying the better stock at the sales because they're the more expensive horses. Of course, it's difficult, but it's not impossible. And somebody is going to come up with a lotto win every year, and that's what keeps everybody going.
No doubt. We mentioned Cheltenham there. Can you spool us back to when you were a young trainer, and you were one of the first Irish trainers in particular to really go at targeting Cheltenham, it seems, from looking at the record books. What was the decision process behind that? Was it a fairly obvious thing for you to do, and how did you end up being so successful so early?
I was lucky enough to obviously acquire, buy, get sent, or whatever, horses that were potentially good enough. And once I saw the potential, I mean, we'd always start in, say, September time, and you'd have maybe 20, 25 horses that you might turn around and say, yeah, I think those 25 horses could make Cheltenham. And then by Christmas time, you might end up with maybe 7 or 8 or 9 or whatever. And then by Cheltenham, well, you might end up with 1, 2, 3 or whatever. We never had big numbers. I think there are trainers there today that maybe have as many runners at one meeting as maybe I've had there all my life.
So it was as simple as that. You realised the horses were good enough to go to Cheltenham, but it didn't seem like that many Irish trainers were sending horses specifically to Cheltenham or plotting the course of the season with Cheltenham in mind. Were you one of the first ones to do that properly?
It might appear that way. I don't know that I set out it. I don't know that the other trainers felt any different, but we certainly planned very much to have the horses peaked at Christmas, and then we planned to maybe give them a run in sometime in February, and then we'd have them for March. But they always had a very easy January, whereas now there's much more very good racing in January, and people race their horses, I won't say more often, but there are a lot more opportunities.
I suppose that makes sense. And look, this is a question I ask everybody who comes on. Feel free to tell me as much or as little as you want about it, but how do you get your horses to peak? What was your method for making sure that you felt this horse was ready to run in this race as fast as it possibly can over the distance that you felt was the appropriate one? What was your method?
Well, I think we'd have them ready to maybe 85-90% at Christmas. And if they were capable of doing what they were supposed to do at Christmas, then it gave us the confidence that give them a little easy in January and a prep race that mightn't be too difficult or too hard, that we would set them up. We would set them up for Cheltenham and then hope they were going to be good enough.
Did you have any idea in those days, like, of comparing the Irish and British form? Now they're, they have your anti-post markets, and it's kind of fairly well established. Like, did you go over there with increasing confidence every year? And obviously these were the days when Irish winners weren't exactly 10 a penny at Cheltenham.
Yeah, but you see, You see, in those days, you had Toby Baldwin, you had Fulqualwan, you had Fred Rymel, and a number of others, and they had agents here in Ireland and in England coming over and buying the stock. And they brought those stock back to England, and sometimes they took a year, sometimes they took less, and they became very successful and they won. Whereas in this country, we didn't have those owners, and we couldn't keep those horses. My late father, got a very good horse called I'm Happy. It was an absolutely superb horse, but Toby Baldwin bought him, and he became an equally good horse in England. I had a very good horse early on, Mr. Bosun. He became a very good horse in the UK. They bought our horses, whereas now they're not the horses. Those owners and those horses are staying in this country.
I made this point before a bit, Edward, about these Irish African kids who become so amazingly good at sport, and it's entirely a product of a kind of a booming economy where people come over here for a better life, and racing has been like that as well, hasn't it? Like, because just the economy has brought about this, this kind of wealth where people can afford these extremely expensive horses and keep them here.
Well, we're fortunate, that there are people who have the interest in racing and are prepared to spend money. And by comparison, if it was the late Jack, what was his name? He owned in Newcastle. And he was putting about 30 or 40 million a year into Newcastle to try and keep it going. And then you'd have the fellas on the terraces shouting, Jack so-and-so is a this and Jack so-and-so is that. Whereas for a couple of million a year, probably less than 5, they can become major players in this sport. They're getting in in a way, they're getting in for nothing. By comparison to, it's an amount of money and it's a level that I can't even dream about. But it is there for those people. It doesn't matter whether they're into jet planes or whether they're into major yachts that cost fortunes. This is actually, by comparison, it's a cheap way of becoming big into a wonderful sport.
Hard to imagine Mike Ashley becoming a big racing owner anytime soon.
Well, you never know. I mean, who knows? Who knows where he's going to pop up next? We talk about Derby County. I'm very interested in that kind of ability to rise to the top as well. So you're a young man who is a trainee vet who, by circumstances forced upon you, becomes a trainer. How quickly did you realise this was something that you were actually going to be good at?
Oh, listen, I don't believe I was ever good at it, but I've survived at it. I was good enough to survive, and I've been very grateful. It's been a topsy-turvy time. It's been a wonderful time with wonderful people and wonderful places, wonderful horses. But it's always been survival. I mean, I've been paying the wages every Friday since January 1972, and that's a long time. That's a long time to be paying wages. And I can tell you that I still worry every Friday about paying the wages. It has always been thus, and that's the way it is. But I'm happy enough I'm probably grey enough to show that I do worry about it. But we keep doing it and we keep loving it.
Was there breathing space? Because just for anybody who might be unfamiliar with your track record, Irish champion trainer 4 years in a row, 77, 78, 79, 80, and the list of massive races that you've won, Irish Grand Nationals at Tingle Creek and retaining it and all that kind of stuff. So were there periods where you felt like you were on top of it and you had a bit of breathing space and you could bring the full force of your own ambition to bear, and that the skill set of training was something you were comfortable with?
Well, it's not so much that, but at the end of 79/80, all my owners were mainly farmers, and farming took a big step downhill after that. And because they were good farmers and reasonably good businessmen, the first thing they wanted to get rid of back in those days was the racehorse. So I changed from 80 to 90. I changed to the flat, which was a totally different kettle of fish altogether. Never had much more than about 25 flat horses. But funny thing, from a business point of view, commercially, it was successful because we were known as traders, and we sold a lot of particularly fillies to Australia, to America, to England, to various different places. So that was a big learning curve after the decade in the 70s. Yeah.
Joe Malloy had Gary Murphy on, who wrote the biography rather of Charlie Haughey. And I found the book incredibly compelling. But one of the points in the book is his struggles, obviously, his well-known struggles as the Minister for Agriculture. And I didn't realise, Edward, that the problems that farmers were having in, as I think, like the early 80s, give or take, directly influenced like trainers actually at that time.
I didn't exactly get that.
So the problems that farming had in the 80s, it actually resulted in you completely changing your MO almost.
Oh yeah, it had an enormous effect. I mean, either the guy got rid of the horse, or else he couldn't pay his bill. Get rid of the horse is better than not paying the bill. And yeah, there were crisis times in Ireland. There were crisis times. There's no doubt about it. And the guys the gentlemen I was training for, were in that boat, and so there was no point in me paddling against the stream. So I decided I'd change. I thought I was being clever at the time. I thought that was the way to go.
And the decision to go back and go back training jumps horses, was that easy and straightforward? Had you had enough for the flat, or what was the process after in the 90s?
I suppose that there is something about enjoying success, and while we had loads of winners, plenty of winners on the flat, there wasn't a lot of what I call success that you could actually sit back and of an evening and just have a drink and say, God, I'm really pleased the way that went, or whatever. And my son said to me at the end of the 80s, he said to me one day, he said, Dad, why don't you train those Cheltenham winners anymore? He said, I've been reading about these and I was too young and this, that and the other. And I said, okay, maybe we give it a shot again. And then the following year or 2 years later, we had a great double at Cheltenham with Time for a Run and Mucklemeg. But it didn't quite get the publicity it should have got as a double of the day, because it happened to be the same day that Denoli won. And he was the people's champion. So we got steamrolled a bit, but it was still a great double to have.
What age was your son when he imparted this advice?
He was about 19, I'd say. 18 or 19, I would say.
The first time a parent ever listened to his 19-year-old son and decided that he was right, I guess.
Isn't it funny?
Because he went to Cheltenham. I gave him a present. I brought him over for the day. He flew over for the day, and anyhow, I was saying to him afterwards, "Did you have a good day?" And he said, "Oh yeah." He said, "I had a very good day." He said, "Yeah, I had a bit with Mr. Power." I said, "Oh, did you?" And yeah, he said, I did actually. He said, I backed Time for a Run, and then I had a little double, I say. So he went on and on about this, and I said, I said, "How much money did you win? What are you talking about? This is the fellow is a student at Trinity College." And I said, "How much did you win?" He said to me, "I won 15. I said, "You won 1,500. He said, "No, I won 15,000.
Oh my God!
Holy moly! Wow! I thought you were going to say 15 quid at the end. That was the
I hadn't won
punchline.
anything, and he lived on champagne for the rest of the year in Trinity.
Oh wow! I thought.
No
Wow.
wonder he wanted me back.
Oh my God! They're the stories you want to hear.
Frightening.
The 300 quid student overdraft you had at Bank of Ireland in Ballsbridge in the 70s was easily paid off with that.
That is absolutely true. That is absolutely true. And the first week I was training, my uncle P.P. Hogan, he came up to me, and he gave me a check, a folded check, and in the check there was I think there was 300 odd quid, and he said to me, "That'll help you pay your first week's wages," and it was money he got out of a horse deal. And instead of cashing it himself, he gave it to me.
Wow.
That helped me pay my first week's wages. Yeah.
And I'd say you probably needed it as well at that stage. Like every little bit was pieced together to keep the business going.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. My father was wonderful, but he hadn't paid a bill or sent a bill for about 3 years. So it wasn't easy, to say the least.
And your introduction was mad, because I know your dad was ill when you got married and died shortly afterwards, but was he at your wedding then?
Was he what?
Was he at your wedding before he passed away then?
He was training. He had the license.
And was he at you got married just before he passed away, didn't you?
Yes, I did. I got married on the 3rd and he died on the 13th of January.
And was he there to actually to be at your wedding and so on?
Was he at the wedding?
Was he riding?
At wedding.
Oh, no, he wasn't at the wedding. No.
I sincerely hope he wasn't riding anyway at that time.
No, he wasn't. He wasn't at the wedding. He wasn't well enough.
And that was the background to your first winner, which it was really a remarkable time in your life.
Yeah, the owners he had, they were all very good friends of his, and they didn't necessarily appreciate that maybe I should take over. I think some of them thought maybe I should finish my studies. Some of them thought, quite rightly, I didn't have the price of it. And a lot of those owners, not that many of them, but a lot of them went different ways afterwards, and I just had to find new owners and keep going.
What age were you? I mean, you must have been an absolute
22.
22. So not many trainers have taken it up at 22.
No, I think that maybe Noel Mead and Jim Draper probably did something similar around the same time. But we've stood the test of time, thank God.
What was the landscape like in those days? Who were the main trainers?
Oh, Paddy Slater, and I used to approach Paddy Slater slightly in a paternal manner, and I would ask him for a bit of advice here and there, and he was generally pretty good. There was Dan Moore, Paddy Slater, and my father, and they had 3 sons born the same week, more or less the same week, back in 1949. And they had a bet of 100 quid a man as to whose son would ride the first winner. And sadly, at a very early age, Paddy Slater's son got tragically killed off a tractor. So it sort of half nullified the bet. And there was Arthur Moore and myself left. And maybe my father just wanted to win it, but I was lucky enough to ride my first winner in a point at the age of 13.
13? Wow.
13, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. 1973. And I don't think I think that the £100 was forgotten about. But Arthur and I are great friends. We were born the same week, and we've been friends all our lives. The families have been great friends too.
Did you expect that you would go on to become a jockey at that stage? Was that your own career plan as a teenager?
I think that my weight was a little bit against it. Perhaps if I'd stayed at home, I might have remained somewhat lighter. But I can remember at one stage my father said to me, "Boy, this place isn't big enough for the two of us. You're going to do veterinary." So that was it, kick in the pants and away you go.
I've got to ask you about Golden Cygnus, and just looking up here, Vincent O'Brien described him as the best hurdler I've ever seen. What was he like to you?
Well, I think hindsight would suggest the fact that he had Sea Pigeon and Night Nurse stone cold as a novice coming to the last in the Scottish Champion Hurdle. It would suggest to me that he was potentially the best hurdler of all time. For me, he was, but you'd have to say it was potentially. But without a doubt, those two horses were definitely two of the best hurdlers of all time. And this fellow was only in his first year as a novice, and you'd hope would only get better. So I think that yes, he probably was the best hurdler of all time.
So Golden Cygnus, for anybody who's not familiar, won the Supreme Novice at Cheltenham in 78 and then died after a fall in that race. You're talking about the Scottish Champion Hurdle at Ayr just a month later.
Well, he was unbeaten over hurdles, and he just took one of those false steps at the last hurdle, and he fell on his head and bent his head. But you know, we brought him back to the stables that evening, and he just wasn't right. His head was a little crooked. It wasn't as straight as it should be. And we put him straight into the horse box, and we brought him to what they call the Royal Dick, which is the veterinary hospital in Edinburgh. And he went there on Saturday night. And I've always learned since, you know, if you do the right thing, you can live with it. And we did the right thing. We brought him there, and he was looked after brilliantly. And he was okay on Sunday. And they called me on Sunday and said, yeah, the horse is fine. We're pleased with him. And on Monday, I think I went racing to an evening meeting in Kilbeggan. And I can remember coming home that night, and I was exhausted. I had a long weekend, one thing and another. And I was sitting down having a boiled egg, and the telephone rang. And it was the guys from the hospital in Edinburgh to tell me the horse had a brain hemorrhage and they had to put him down. It was a frightful loss for both the owners, the yard, for myself. It really was. But as I said, you know, when you do the right thing, you don't you try and move forward after that.
There's kind of something extra special about, like, you think of, you know, the musicians who died young, and maybe there's this kind of beauty attached to them. Just looking at some of the things that were said, Niall Madden described him as a freak. I knew then, no matter how long I'd be in the game, I'd never ride another like him. He was different, all right, said O'Grady. The further most horses go in a race, the more they come off the bridle. When he jumped off at the back of the field, he wouldn't pull. But the further he moved through the field, the more he started to pull. Exactly the opposite to a normal horse. He was certainly the best I ever had.
That's exactly. He was most peculiar phenomenon. Most peculiar phenomenon. When all the others were getting empty, this was when he was filling up. It was the opposite to what you'd expect any normal horse to do. And he just came on the bridle going to the second last, and he started to pull going to the last. I mean, he was just extraordinary, and what a hurdler. He was absolutely dynamite.
I was in Cheltenham and in the press room when Sir Eric passed away, and I remember I'd never experienced anything like it at a racing meeting, if even a sporting event, where the place just went cold for a half an hour afterwards. But we'd no attachment to the horse, bar the attachment one would have as a racing fan. What's it like when you're a trainer and maybe the best you will ever have suffers a death like that?
Well, the fact that he was in Edinburgh and I was sitting here in Killeens, it was like a death in the family overseas. We just went numb. I mean, I reported to the owners. Ray Rooney was the number one owner of the group that owned him, and I'd reported to him, you know, good news, horse, they're very pleased with the horse now, etc., etc. It just shows you 24 hours is a very long time in a horse's life, and very often we report to owners that your horse is fine, and you might go out in the yard that evening and find the same horse lame. I mean, it happens all the time, but you know, that was a frightful tragedy.
I remember we had Ted Walsh on here, and he's talking about Comanche Court, and he literally pretty much was welling up in studio talking about Comanche Court, and people who don't live with horses, I guess, maybe they have pets or whatever, and they might see something similar. But I think, Edward, the relationship that the horse and the person, in principally not even the trainer, but the person who's looking after the horse, it's a really unique and special thing that is hard to put into words.
I just can't. I can't explain it to you. The only, we were young enough, I suppose, at the time to think that there'd be another number 6 bus coming along. You live your life with enthusiasm and expectation, and we try and move forward, which is what I'd like to do right now.
Fair enough. Let me ask you about the last two most recent winners that you've had. The Priory Park won at Leopardstown on December the 28th, and then Bridge Street won at Tremor on New Year's Day. Given your pedigree and your track record, are either or / both of those horses that we should expect to see busy in March?
Well, Bridge Street is a mare that I bred myself, and Priory Park is a horse that I bought as a foal, and JP kindly bought the two of them as 3-year-olds. And I have to say, I'm impressed with the way Priory Park is at the moment. But last year he was pretty moderate. Now, whether my horses were under a cloud, I'm not exactly sure, but he has certainly turned a corner. But he's still, he's now rated 121, which isn't a terribly high rating. And he'd probably run in the 3-mile hurdle at Leopardstown on the 4th of February. Now, there are two things there. Number one, he'll have to step up from 2.5 to 3 miles. And number two, we just have to see what he's like in a better handicap. It might be, he mightn't be either for either, or he might be just able maybe to go back to 2.5 miles another time. I don't know. It'll be a big learning curve.
Okay, so we'll see Priory Park at the Dublin Racing Festival. What are the plans for Bridge Street?
Bridge Street is, we'll stick to mares races, and there's a 2.5 mile mares race coming up at Leopardstown, the meeting after the festival. And I, while I'd love her to get into black type, she'd probably struggle to do that. She'd probably stay handicapping.
Okay. The 50th anniversary is this week. Do you have any specific plans for the Thyestes?
I don't actually. I'm very surprised that anybody remembered it or bothered to remember it. I'm embarrassed that there's been a bit of publicity about it. And I'm delighted that Timmy Hyde, who rode the winner, is going to join me for lunch that day.
Great.
And we might reminisce a little bit. But I'm embarrassed, quite frankly, that people have remembered it, and but at the same time, I'm delighted they have. But I am embarrassed by it, quite frankly.
There's no need. You're downplaying your sporting significance there as the man for a long time was the go-to trainer if you wanted to back an Irish horse at Cheltenham.
Well, it's nice of you to say that.
Edward, we wish you continued success, and I hope you enjoy the day and the celebration, and I hope you have a very successful season for what remains of the jump season this year. Thanks a million for joining us today, Edward.
It's very kind of you. Thank you very much indeed. I've enjoyed it.
It's Edward O'Grady there, a legendary Irish trainer, reflecting on an incredible career over 5 decades. As we said, you made the point, I think his Cheltenham winning record in terms of Irish trainers is third only behind the big two, and that's obviously come recently, so he would have been ploughing a lone furrow at the top of the leaderboard for a long period of time.
For a long time, Willie Mullins, his Cheltenham record was roughly I think it was 2 winners every 3 years, give or take. So when I get into racing, and I mentioned back in front, and he's talking about reminiscing there, even I'm reminiscing about the watching your first Cheltenham. I was in college, and we went to the Viscount pub in Whitehall, just beside the bookie shop where all our lives were effectively ruined, and we all met each other, and back in front, Norman Williamson colours, and to think I'd seen that horse in the student race day in Limerick. I'd seen him win well. I hadn't an absolute breeze about racing, but everyone was talking about back and front, the Magna colours, Edward O'Grady, and the likes of Pizarro and these good horses, and just a top trainer who is synonymous with Cheltenham. And like as we spoke about, he mentioned Arthur Moore, and there are these trainers that I don't think they regress with age. It's just the way the scene has changed in Ireland, such that there is a concentration among maybe 3 trainers that have the owners to, as he said, trawl, which I thought was a very good word. Trawl it'd be like kind of, I guess, Man City, PSG, and
Chelsea. It's really Chelsea who do that.
Buying the young players.
Yeah, which is what
buying the young players. Yeah, and just sweeping it all over the world, bringing the young players, and it's. I think it'd be lovely for him to get a very good horse again. I'm a sop for nostalgia, but like even I my first memory of an Edward O'Grady winner isn't even 20 years ago, so he's talking 50 years. For somebody who's been around long enough to see Edward O'Grady and might even remember his first winner on Yesterday's Day, the prospect of Edward O'Grady getting a very good horse that could win at Cheltenham again is just a lovely thought.
Yeah, no, it would be absolute magic. If you want to leave a comment on the YouTube stream, you can do that. We'll get to some of those in a while. Or of course, if you want to text the show in the evening, 53106 is the text number. You can get it during the day, 0879 180 180. We'll take a quick break.
Friday Night Racing
on Off the Ball.
Brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment. Visit hri.ie. Friday Night Racing
on Off the Ball.
Brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment. Visit hri.ie.
Yes, this is Friday Night Racing, brought to you by HRI. Love every racing moment. Visit hri.ie and the hashtag is every racing moment. We haven't yet addressed the fact that a race for the ages is due tomorrow, Johnny.
Yeah, he mentioned Night Nurse and Sea Pigeon and all that. Maybe this race isn't quite up there, but there was, Nicky Henderson and Edward O'Grady, they wouldn't be totally unalike in the sense that they prioritised Cheltenham, or certainly Edward did when he had a good horse, and often this means that Nicky Henderson, I don't know, he wusses it out a bit in terms of prep races. Like, really, I'm not even going to call them prep races because it's not all about Cheltenham. Cheltenham is sadly now 4 days rather than 3, but there are 362 odd days in the year where Cheltenham isn't on, and Nicky has bailed out on plans before with very good horses, but Shishkin is not the case tomorrow, and his run against Honor Jameen in the Clarence House, only 4 runners, might as well only be 2. It's an absolute race of the ages. 3:35. Don't be anywhere else, even though actually I'll be on Off the Ball Saturday and Off the Ball. John Duggan will be like, Johnny?
Wouldn't be
Johnny?
the first time you've been distracted
Johnny?
in the studio.
But JD will probably be watching the race as well. So actually, if you are on Off the Ball Saturday, if you are listening tomorrow, we'll probably go missing for about 4 minutes. So
or you can tell everybody what's happening.
Graham Gartland can step in and just present the show for those 4 minutes, or maybe we'll just commentate. I mean, it's the modern day, not that many games on at 3 o'clock. We can interrupt our conversation about Ireland's goalkeeping situation or whatever it is and discuss who wins between Honor Jameen and Shishkin, because this is just a race between 2 horses who just don't lose. So one of them will have. So hopefully, it's a dead heat. Like
for those people who you were going to convince to do this tomorrow to turn away from the football, what should they expect?
It's a 2 horse.
Why are these 2 horses so special?
It's a 2 mile chase, which arguably is the
1,500 metres. It's the blue ribbon.
It's the greatest spectacle.
Not the blue ribbon, but they're the best horses.
Yeah, you can imagine
they have both stamina, jumping ability, and speed.
Exactly.
That's 3 things.
Shishkin lost once in a point, and Honor Jameen was kind of hard to believe. He was beaten at a bumper since then. So they've effectively lost 1 race each, which they can very early in their life. Both can be exonerated, even that. And a 2 mile chase is basically. I'm of the opinion that I still don't think.
Sorry, not the 1,500. It's the 800 metres.
Well, whatever. Like, I'm not into athletics, but whatever is your like the 100 meters. But like, okay, but whatever. The race.
Well, I was thinking more of the hard. They go hard the whole time.
Yeah, and
There's no hiding here.
And you can imagine being a jockey on the horse, like jumping at that speed over a fence, and you know the thrill of it around Ascot. So it's these two horses that just don't know how to lose, and they are genuinely two of the great 2 mile chasers of recent times. And Honor Jameen will probably have a chance to show that at Cheltenham. But one of them, please God, there isn't a non-runner, because it's happened in Champion Chase in recent years. It's just been a horse's scratch for pure bad luck on the day. But if this is your introduction to racing, and it's only a 4-horse race, it might be what you expect. I still think we don't do a good enough job on TV in showing how amazing horses are, particularly jumping fences. And with HD, I still think we're miles behind where we could be. And if you see these two horses in action tomorrow and you think it's boring, you'll never get into racing. Basically, I don't need to promote it anymore.
3:45.
3:35.
Listen off the ball on News Talk. 3:35. Listen off the ball on News Talk.
3:35. I call JD right now to do a commentary on the race live. And forget about Spurs if they're playing at 3 o'clock tomorrow. I saw Spurs, they're not playing tomorrow. So I call you JD. Show me what you can do as a racing commentator, and I'm giving you the easiest of easy starts. It's a 4-horse race, and you've basically 4 horses to call. You can't make a mess of it. And
I mean, I do like the idea of this, and maybe actually doing the
whatever about our sponsors.
Well, Hale and Pace obviously did. I remember those comedians. They were then they put them out first day, no training, and the lads were like, that one is in front of the other one, and there's another one, and there's the fourth one. They all look fairly similar to me.
Well, around about that time where I mentioned getting into racing, Phelan, my classmate in college, he must have been running some sort of radio equivalent of the college newspaper, because he asked me to do commentary on the Curragh Guineas, and I think it was the Guineas that Bachelor Duke won. Bachelor Duke was a maiden going into the race, which is what sticks out in my head. It was absolutely remarkable. But what also sticks out in my head was how utterly appalling I was at commentating on the race. It's so difficult. I dropped the horse, literally. I never mentioned him once in the race until they were practically in the parade ring afterwards. And I was like, if you listen to that race, you'd be like, that lad should never commentate again. Probably should never do anything again. I'm genuinely amazed at the quality of commentators and how few mistakes they make. I think it's an amazing talent.
It's very, very difficult to do, for sure.
So over to you, JD.
Bob Bollinger's grade 3 success at Punchestown, it says here, last Sunday added even more points to Johnny's tote 10 to follow tally. Not only is Johnny the clear leader in the Friday Night Racing Stakes, he's also just outside the top 1,000 of 28,691 stables in the overall tote 10 to follow competition.
That's not bad at all. Puts me in the top sort of 4-ish%.
1,000. Just outside. It's that we said, just outside. So,
yeah.
Danny Mullins is in second and I am in third, a good bit behind now. The Tote Jackpot is available on racing at Navan and Thurles this weekend. You can play with Tote at races or on tote.ie. Friday Night Racing and Off the Ball is brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment.
Call it before you go.
HRI.ie.
Will JD be a good racing commentator?
Oh, excellent. Yeah. Absolutely. I think
no doubts.
No. I think it might take him a bit of time to get there. Not saying first go he's going to be sensational, but I think it's definitely something that
I've built it up.
You should do an old school 90s Detroit rap battle where you battle it out, someday, and we film it, and then
we absolutely should not.
We should, yeah. I mean, certainly the blooper reel will be excellent. Is there anything else you want to speak about before we go?
I have to say I greatly enjoyed Edward O'Grady. I'm a sop for things that didn't even happen in my lifetime. The nostalgia of that Golden Cygnus story, and just like the amazing circumstances of his first month in racing, and how young he was starting off and losing owners, and just, I suppose, the main thing that I don't think that love has ever gone. I think he's as hungry as ever just to have that winner.
And we'll hear more from Edward about the Thyestes Day itself and what it was actually like. He gets married at the start of January. His father passes away 10 days later, and then he wins his first race as under a temporary licence a week and a half later.
I have to say that I love Goran. I think it's a beautiful racetrack, and my memory of the Thyestes is that we owned a horse called Operation Houdini, and he was, if not favourite for the Thyestes, he was certainly prominent in the betting one of the years. And my girlfriend at the time, anyone who drives from Dublin to Kilkenny/Waterford, that split in the road where you have to take your turn off, or otherwise you're on the Cork Road. So we must have been having an argument or talking about how great I was or whatever you're having yourself. And we missed the turnoff anyway, which was an absolute world of pain. Like, so it must have taken another hour almost to get to Gorn. Arrived just as the horses jumped off. The horse ran very disappointing, and then we went home, and that was it. That was literally my day. So hopefully you'll have a better day if you go on Thursday. There you go. Now, I wasn't driving, I was in the passenger seat.
Well, of course you weren't driving.
I'm sure
you don't drive. You were the navigator. You navigated incorrectly. There's like a fairly obvious turn-off that I have missed myself.
All about my carbon footprint.
Right. That is this week's edition of Friday Night Racing. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. We will see you next week. That second part about Edward O'Grady, by the way, will be on the radio and off the ball on Saturday, tomorrow. Make sure you tune in between 1 and 6, or 1 and 5, and you'll hear, hopefully, John telling you the result of that race. And you'll also hear Edward O'Grady talking about his experience on Tayeste's Day winning his first race. We'll see you next week. Take care.
Friday Night Racing.
On Off the Ball.
Brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment. Visit hri.ie.